Tom Burke is chairman and founding director of E3G, a team of strategists on climate diplomacy and energy policy. He's also a former government advisor on climate change. And he joins me on the programme. Tom, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Tom.
I wonder what you make of what BP is saying about the future of oil.
I think they're getting it pretty right. I think they've been, amongst the international oil companies, they've really put themselves out in front of understanding that change is coming and big change is coming, and they've positioned themselves very well. I noticed that the other week they got a kind of praise from John Sauven of Greenpeace, which is really quite unusual. So I think they're leaving the other oil companies a bit behind them as they adapt to a different future.
I've tried to suggest how the world is sort of moved and responds to oil in perhaps a way that no other commodity demands. You know, everything from the petrol pump prices to filling up your car to world geopolitics and possibly even war. This is the thing that makes the world move. What replaces it?
Well, lots of things replace it. I don't think there's a single thing that replaces it. And funnily enough, what's going to replace it, the use of wind and the sun largely, not completely, but is widely distributed. So I think it will be less amenable to the kind of geopolitical tensions that oil has been amenable to. But we've got to get there, and getting there will mean very dramatic changes in the way we move around the world and in how countries relate to each other. So the real question is, can we make an orderly transition, or is it going to be very disorderly? Yes,
give us an example of the sort of disorderly transition and how that is prompted that you fear.
Well, one of the things immediately is you think of if the European Green Deal works and Europe essentially becomes carbon neutral by the middle of the century, then about a third of Russia's GDP is going to disappear because it currently comes from exporting fossil fuels to the EU. Yep. So that's pretty important. On the other hand, if we're not going to use all the gas that's people are beginning to think lies under the Eastern Mediterranean, then it might not be worth fighting over between Greece and Turkey.
And so that's where people are looking, is it? Sort of Eastern Mediterranean for, what is it, shale gas? What kind of gas is it?
No, it's gas. It's gas under sea. There's a lot of gas under the Eastern Mediterranean. Right now, because of the complex geography and the political relations, there is a risk of another fallout between NATO nations, between Greece and Turkey. But there's other implications. If you're a country like Mozambique, one of the poorest countries in the world, right now there are two major offshore gas developments going forward there, or at least on the verge of being invested in. Now, they may not be needed. Then where does that leave a country like Mozambique? Without the revenues that will bring. So I think there are very big implications all over the world of us basically moving beyond the oil and gas industry.
And so how is that remedied? I mean, for countries, as you say, like Mozambique, and for other smaller countries and with economies that completely rely on this exporting of energy, what do they do?
I think that's going to be very difficult. And if we make an orderly transition, then what we've got to be doing is helping those countries make investments in another basis for their economy. What BP did is very interesting. Basically, what BP said was, well, quite a lot of the oil and gas we've got below ground and is part of things we use to buttress our share price no longer has much value in our view. And the same applies to countries. So countries who are planning on the basis of there being a lot of value in oil and gas are going to need to think very hard about a different plan.
So countries, I mean, again, you think of Saudi Arabia, countries across large swathes of the Middle East, and Russia as well, not least with this Nord Stream 2 pipeline that is running into difficulty that the European Union and Germany has signed a deal with Russia to pipe gas under the North Sea.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because that's now running into political problems. Yep. But it was never very clear that it was going to be a viable economic proposition anyway. There's no shortage of gas in the world. There are lots of different routes to bring gas into the EU if it wants to, not the least from North Africa. So it was always a controversial project economically, and it's now a very controversial project politically. In my view, I don't think it'll make much difference to energy security in Europe if it doesn't go ahead.
I wonder whether energy security is something that people spend a lot of time thinking about. What would happen if the ships were stopped in the Strait of Hormuz that bring the oil to Europe that come to fill people's cars, or the gas pipeline turned off by Russia if it were ever to be built that provides Europe and, to a smaller part, the UK with gas?
Or the same if you think about the straits around Singapore, the Malacca Straits. So you've got these huge vulnerabilities because we've become over-dependent on a commodity. The more we move for energy efficiency and for renewable sources of energy, then because they're so widely distributed, you don't have these same, as it were, choke points that can become very destabilizing sources of tensions between countries.
Would it not be that however gas and oil is replaced, whether through solar or wind or water or whatever, that the same kinds of tensions would still exist that existed over oil and gas, just maybe not as concentrated?
No, I think it really takes away those particular geopolitical tensions because the sun shines everywhere and the wind blows everywhere. That's the point. Yeah. And what we've become increasingly good at doing in recent years is combining a very rapidly falling cost of those technologies with much more sophisticated digitization of our energy system, which allows us to make a much better decisions, a much more capital efficient use of all that money we spend on the equipment. So I think that's clearly the way. That's the way that policy would have gone irrespective of climate change, but climate change makes that more urgent. And I think the markets, in particular, you think the statements coming out of both the central bankers and out of some of the biggest investing companies, they've made it quite clear that they don't see a long-run future.
No. Are you quite excited about that? You sound quite excited about it, even though you've described the problems that are going to be inherent in this.
Yeah, I am quite excited about it because I think that if we think, in a sense, the pandemic is bad, wait till climate change gets to 2 above from the one it's at now. It'll be far, far worse in terms of its impact on all our lives. So yes, I am quite excited at the prospect that we're actually at least in that area, we're moving in the right direction. Now, we're moving too slowly.
Right, I was going to ask, yeah.
A lot of the news that's been coming out in the last few days, and the sight everybody can see of the fires in California. There are, I think, 7 tropical storms simultaneously in the North Atlantic. That is only the second time in nearly 200 years of history that we've seen that amount of hurricane activity. So we're getting a very clear signal from the scientists, from the world itself, that we've got to do a lot more. And at least we've made a start going down the right path. We just need to accelerate that movement.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much. Tom Burke, Chairman, Founding Director of E3G, a team of strategists on climate diplomacy and energy policy, former government advisor on climate change as well. He's excited about a post-oil future.